gotten to know Roy.
I know. I was telling Pastor the other day.
Just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. When Pastor Terry says we should recapture the vision, what do you think the vision for Grace Community Church? Oh, I can see it. I can see it. It's like,
Here, give me that and talk to the camera.
what are you feeling now for the future of Grace? All right. Oh, gosh.
Do you want to start there?
No.
No? Okay.
No, I got to work
All
up
right.
to it.
Okay, so let's just go one at a time. Peach, how long have you attended Grace Community Church?
Well, myself, since 79, I guess. But Roy came here when he was a little boy, and his mother and his grandpa was Bobby Graham. His real name was Robert, but everybody called him Bobby. And when they bought the land where the little Free Will Baptist Church is, it was built for the Assemblies of God Church. That was the first building they ever owned.
All right.
And Grandpa helped build it. He was a carpenter.
Right up there by Casey's?
Yes.
That was the first one.
That was the first one.
Really?
And the funny thing, too, another thing goes along with that was that's where I got saved,
In that church.
in that church.
Wow.
When it was a Baptist church. Not when it was the Assembly of God Church.
All right, what about you, Wanda?
When did I first come? Well, and the reason, first of all, my grandmother Wisdom was, I don't know if she was a charter member, but she was right there at that particular time. I think she was a charter member. And she had come here all along. Of course, she was quite up in years, and what I remember was there was always somebody from this church, I'm going to cry, I don't want to,
That's okay.
would pick her up. She had arthritis, rheumatism real bad, and she couldn't walk hardly at all without canes. She's a bigger woman, older woman. And there was always somebody from this church would come get her.
Oh, wow.
And then I started coming with, Sonda and I were real good friends.
Really?
Sonda Medley. We were friends from 6 years old or under all the way through. And I'd come with them and Glenn and Jewel. And Glenn and Jewel were like second parents to me. I can't do this.
It's okay. So Glenn and Jewel were Sonda's?
Oh, yeah,
Mom and
parents.
Dad,
That
yeah.
was her mom and dad.
Glenn and Jewel, and they had Sonda and Mike. But anyway, I came with them, and of course, once I was involved with that family, then it was Beverly and you know, Shay's dad and mom and sister, and it was just like everybody was here. And we were all teenagers at the time, or actually much younger than teenagers. That's where we started. And so I'd come back and forth, just visiting mostly. And my parents always attended the little Second Baptist church. And I was kind of the black sheep of the family because I got off with these holy rollers, and I was supposed to be a good little Baptist girl. And anyway, it
Upset
was...
a few people.
That's how I got here. That's how I first came.
Wow. So that was in...
Well, let's see. I was born for... It was probably 57, 56. I was probably 8 or 9, 10 maybe.
Wow.
And that's when it started.
Most of your life.
Yeah, that's when it actually started. Of course, I wasn't here the entire time. We left and came back and left and came back. But that's when I first started coming in. It was in the Quonset hut. Oh, and of course, when we came back and from St. Louis and bought the lumber yard, Jim and Charlotte and Ed and I, you know, we were working all the time, and Brother Blaze was here, and it was the Quonset. And Charlotte and I would come and bring the kids, and the boys, well, they just was too busy, you know, they were always working and had to do this and that. Well, Brother Blaze had hit the doors on Monday morning at the lumber yard. Every Monday morning he was there. And he'd go back and get coffee and preach to them 2 boys and why they weren't there and why they need to be there. And they always was real. They wanted to. There was a radio program from the church here every Sunday morning, and the lumberyard mostly sponsored it. And of course, the boys wanted to do everything they could, but they didn't want to come to church. So, and yeah, a couple times we came. There'd be a revival over at the Quonset, and Brother Blaze would be there. And if he'd get real happy, he'd take off from the pulpit all the way down the middle aisle, hit the back doors, and they'd swing open. We thought if anybody was there, they'd got killed. It was hilarious. And one night they had a preacher. I don't want this on, but this is funny. One night they had a preacher that was a prophecy teacher, whatever. He'd come to you and tell you things about you.
Oh yeah.
And it's
Like Bishop.
Well, a little different, but yeah. But anyway, the boys came with Charlotte and I that night, and there was cousin and his wife and so forth. But anyway, these guys hadn't been coming to church all the time. Well, that guy came off the pulpit and headed toward us, and we all hit the back door.
We're out of here.
We're gone.
Don't want him reading my mail.
But
We've done that more than once.
then, but the boys really liked Brother Blaze, and he never did give up on him. He kept on, and then finally they decided to start coming with us, and they knew, they were raised, they knew all about it. It was easier not to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So eventually it was all of us, and we were here most all the time once that started.
Yeah. Wow.
So
So
funny.
Pastor Terry is doing his series, Are You Ready, with the 3 R's. And the first thing he says is that we should regard the past, and that's what he's going to preach on Sunday. But when he says that, what do you think of? What do you think that we should hold dear, that we should hold in high regard about our past and our history?
I can tell you exactly, because it was very strong. The prayer warriors. I can see these little old, this is funny, these little old women all over the church that I knew were praying for all of us and many other people. Mm-hmm. And now I look at Charlie and I think, were those little old women all over the church?
We just
better
ain't
get busy.
We just ain't dyed our hair blue yet.
Oh, but I can see
Oh,
Sylvia Wood, I can see Goldie Kugler, I can see Jewel Medley. I mean, the prayer warriors. That's probably why the majority of us are here now.
That's why this church
And you
is
can-
still here.
And you can still feel it when you go in the sanctuary. You can just feel those prayers.
Yes, you can. Yes, you
Yeah.
can.
I know.
That's
I
it.
don't want to cry all the time. Oh,
What do you
course.
think?
Roy's mother basically raised her family by herself, doing laundries, washing and ironing and stuff for people. And they never ever had a car, but until Roy was old enough to drive. But they would walk. They lived right over here on Pershing where I used to live.
Uh-huh.
And they would walk to church. And here she come with all the little ones, just stair steps,
Mm-hmm.
But this is where she came and was here forever almost. It was a short time when Roy Lee's uncle, her brother, was ordained and was preacher, but he was with Full Gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he built the little Revival Tabernacle building when it started from being a horse barn. I can't talk. But anyway, Roy used to always say, I knew I was going to church even if she had to slap me every minute to get me there. And I think about that, and then later in years how much the Lord had used him
Mm-hmm.
and just had such a wonderful ministry to people.
Mm-hmm.
It was prophesied over him years ago
Wow.
that God would give him the desires of his heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a desire to be closer to the Lord.
What makes Grace different?
presence when you walk in the sanctuary. The Spirit is here. You know it's here. And we have times that, and this is what I remember a lot from these past times that I think is coming again.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of an ebb and a flow. That, oh my goodness, there's been times when you could not wait to get in the doors. I mean, you'd work all day and say, yes, we get to go to church tonight. I can't wait to get there.
Yeah.
And once you did, that presence was there, and that overpowering love, overpowering feeling of love.
Yeah.
And I feel that is what is so strong when you think about the Spirit and the presence. It's that love that just overwhelms you for everything and everybody.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to go back to, though, of things I remember back in those days, that really has made an impression on me.
It's okay. There's Kleenex right next to you if you need it.
Was especially when Charlotte and I were coming, bringing the kids before the boys would come with us, is Sandy Curley. Sandy Curley came to Sunday school every Sunday morning, and she was always late. But she came in, and I don't know if she had 2 or 3 at the time, but there was 2 or 3 little girls following her, and she never missed. And I always thought, and she did it all on her own. And I always admired her for that.
Me too.
And still do.
I still do.
And still do.
Yeah.
But things like that makes impressions on people that you have no idea. No.
That's one of the things that I was talking about with Jerry and Felisa was I don't see the faithfulness today that I saw when I was growing up.
Right.
The commitment, it's just not there anymore. It's rare
It is rare.
that you don't see committed people like you used to. I remember the Omies at Revival Tabernacle. They were there every time the doors were open.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
always there.
We went there for years when your grandpa was pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved to St. Louis and just didn't go to church. And we come back here and finally decided we better get ourselves back to church. And Roy was seriously ill. He worked far too hard. But anyway, in the meantime, Selah, his sister, and James, her husband, they had started going to New Home Baptist Church, and both of them got saved. And I mean, they got gloriously saved and turned everything over to the Lord. And it just, I kept saying, well, come and go with us, church. You haven't been to church. He said, well, it's too hard to get in. You know, there's all those steps in front. And James said, you know, that don't make a bit of difference. You're going to go, we'll meet you, and you'll come and go with us to church. Well, we went a couple of times. And then we were coming back in town and got right up here by Philmart. And Roy said, we're going to go to church here. And I said, we are? He said, yeah. He says, I think we're supposed to go to church here today. I said, sounds good to me. So we ended up here. And like I said, there was many, many, many times that you could just feel an overwhelming presence of the Lord. It was just, now Brother Bennett was here by then. I came a few times off and on when Brother Blaze was here. But one day I was working selling advertising, of course. This kind of all goes back a few years of this and that. But anyway, Wanda and Ed always had the Sunday morning preaching from the Lumberyard, sponsored it, you know. So then we started having the singing Christmas tree and all the different things, and Brother Bennett was here then. And so I said, I'm going to go talk to the preacher. And I said, this is always so good that people who can't get out, they never get to see it or hear it. And I said, you guys need to sponsor that so it can be aired. The singing Christmas tree could be aired. Oh, yeah, they're all for that. I said, good. I said, we'll get it all set up, for you. So it'll just be,
Wow.
they'll get to see it, or get to hear it. They couldn't see it then. We didn't have everything we have now.
Yeah.
But they could hear it,
Mhm.
And there was just so many things. I remember Roy's mom, when we built this sanctuary here, well, she had a dream about the church. And she said it was like I was up in there where the steeple was, looking down. And she said there was just streams and lines of people walking. And they were all coming in the front doors.
I feel that.
Yeah.
I feel that.
And she testified to that I don't know how many times. And she said, I know we'll see it filled. God showed me this place will be filled with people drawn by the Spirit, because there was no other reason. Nothing had been done in her dream except she was up there looking at this vision.
So this was built, what, 1980?
85.
85. So she must have had that dream
Right
around
after
then?
that. Right after we started having
We need to
services
write that
here.
down.
And of course, there's just been so many times when we had the tent revivals. I don't
Yeah, I
know
was
if you
thinking
even
those.
remember
Jerry,
them.
Jerry was talking about
Oh, yeah.
that.
Oh, now that was powerful.
Yeah, it was.
That was powerful.
And people would come, and the ones that wouldn't necessarily come in, they'd park all around and sit and
sit in
listen.
their car and listen.
And it was very powerful, the tent revivals were.
Oh, yes.
They really were.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was different, people would come and listen and watch.
Yeah.
And a few of
He
them
said
come
it
in.
was still gravel out there.
Oh,
Mhm,
yeah.
It was.
And
Yeah.
I don't remember when we actually buy that lot.
Remember.
I don't know either, but anyway, it
About the
was.
same time the gathering place was built. See, it was real close to then, because that would have been our main parking.
Well,
there.
no, because Butch and they would have a lot of the people that would come and pray before service, so they'd come in the sanctuary, which was over here then.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have any of this then. It was all over there. And Roy'd always go in and stay in and pray before service. And Butch Stringer, he'd always be in there praying, and I don't know how many, several, And it seemed like it was mostly men,
Mm-hmm. More men then.
more men than
Wow.
women.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went ahead and went to the church, or the tent, when the services started, and the men hadn't come out of the church.
Yeah, still praying.
They were still praying. And I was just about ready to get up and go see what was wrong. Because naturally you think, oh gosh, maybe something happened to Roy, But anyway, I bet the service was a quarter of the way through. They'd missed probably at least a quarter of the service. But they had their own over here. And Butch Stringer was praying with Roy and praying for Roy. And he said every time he'd touch him, that Roy would just raise up, like he was just going to stand up out of that chair, And Butch said, I really thought he was. And I said, well, I was sitting over here watching the door, and I was waiting for him to walk out.
Expectation.
Expectation, But oh my goodness, the things that the Lord's done over the years and the people that he's touched. And
One of the revivals we had in the gathering place, and we had some really good revivals over there.
boy,
And people slain in the spirit, and you think of being slain in the spirit, And the truth about that is when they come up and they're completely changed. So much of the time, that's what happened. They would be slain in the spirit, and then when they came up, it was like a whole new person. You know, their attitude and their mind and this overwhelming love that just envelops you. And I had, we've seen a friend that played nightclub music in the nightclubs in Chicago, and God talked to him in the nightclub and said, okay, enough's enough. You know, you don't have too many more chances, because he was raised in church and he knew. And he came in the door in the middle of one of those revivals and hit the altar as fast as he could get there, and that was the end. He never went back.
Yeah.
His life was changed. And we had revival one night, and actually it was over, and the phone was ringing. And actually Todd, who was at that time about 10, 11,
Probably.
I don't know who was there with him, but church was over, and you know, we'd had a very good service. Todd was in one of the back rooms praying in tongues. Very sincere, 10, 11 years old. And there may have been some more in there with him, I don't know, but we got up and everybody was leaving, and I told Dad, I said, well, I don't know what's going on, but let's just sit here and wait. So we went and sat down on the front row of church, and he was still in this back room praying. And the phone rang, and somebody answered it, and they told Brother Bennett he needed to take the phone. So he went over and answered the phone, and I heard him say, well, no, I can't come there, but you can come here. If you want prayer, come here. We will be here and we'll wait for you. So he hung up the phone and he said, there's a young lady that wants prayer, and she's coming. So Mickey and Tammy was here, and Tammy was pregnant. And, I don't remember who all else was here, but I don't know, Butch Stringer I know was there, Mickey, Ed and Todd eventually came out and was involved in it. And I can't remember who else, but there were several. But most everybody else had left. Well, this young lady comes in, and she comes in the back door, and Brother Bennett talks to her. I don't know what all was said, but she said, yes, I need prayer. I need prayer. So we went to the altars. We all knelt down, kind of around her, and was just praying for her. At that point, the evil spirits took over her body. And she was screaming, and she was trying to harm herself, pulling at her hair and so forth. And I know...
her voice changed.
Yeah, her voice did change. It was a deeper voice than what she was talking with before. And Brother Bennett would just pray for her, and he'd say, we're not having this, devil. You have to leave her, come out and leave her alone. And at one point, I know Mickey and Ed was holding her hands. Somebody walked in, they thought was hurting her, but they were holding her hands to keep her from pulling her own hair out. They were just holding her, and she would scream and was like she was trying to get away. And at one point, I was kind of at her feet, and she really couldn't see me because she was laying backwards. And I picked up a Bible laying there, and I just touched her legs, and she screamed. She said, "Get it off of me, it's burning." And anyway, this went on for a while, and finally, Brother Bennett, had said, you can't, you've got to leave. In the name of Jesus, you have to leave her. And eventually she just kind of calmed down. And at one point she did that, and Brother Bennett says, you lying spirit, I know you're still there. And he kept praying. And then eventually she did calm down, and when she finally calmed down and came to herself, she was like, she didn't know what had happened. She didn't know what had gone on, but she was fine. And Brother Bennett says, "Can you say, 'Jesus is my Lord'?" And she could, and just smiled, just sweet as she could be. In the beginning, he had asked that, and she could say, "Jesus is Lord," but she could not say, "Jesus is my Lord." So toward the end, whenever he said that, and she did, I know, me too. She could say it, and she was fine. You could tell she was all right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often wondered what happened to that girl. But I think somebody took her or went with her or helped her get back or did somebody, they didn't just leave her there. But that was one thing that will stick in my mind forever. And the main thing I felt coming out of all that is we don't realize the strength Satan has on us, but we also don't realize how much stronger God's strength is. And we don't have to be afraid of it.
The power.
The power.
Delivering power.
Yeah. And that was an eye-awakening thing for me as far as knowing the true power of God.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I think we're going to see these things happening. And I've always felt for a long time, and maybe it was just me, because, you know, I was not raised in a family that had much and had not ever been in any kind of business or anything like that. And I've always felt there needs to be people that stand up for God and are actually the Christian light can shine through them, that are people of maybe has, I don't want to say influence, but that people look up to. But they look up to them because of their
Sincerity.
and they're standing up for the Lord instead of all these other stuff you hear about people all the time that they do all these things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they need a role model that means something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've kind of felt, I feel that way about this church in the community. I feel, you know, we started out as the Holy Rollers on the other side of the tracks that, you know, everybody kind of grinned at. But at the same time now, I know just in my own experience, if I have someone or a friend that's really in dire need, really, really needs the Lord, who are they going to come to? Some of these holy rulers over here that know how to pray, know how to reach God.
Because the Holy Ghost is power, the empowerment.
That's right, and you can feel it. You can feel. Oh, another thing that I think I'll never forget, and this is awful, and it isn't awful. We had Ed's funeral here, and we'd been through a really bad year. And I know through that entire year, I could not get the words out of my mind, and they stayed there through the whole end. To God be the glory. If you have to go through all this and all this suffering, some way, somehow, God has to be glorified through it. And I will always be glad that we had his service and his visitation here. And at the visitation, our most amazing, better than anywhere else, worship team played the whole time during that visitation, and it was quite lengthy. And lots of people came.
Oh, yeah. They were lined up all the way outside.
And I had a girl I worked with, and she and her husband came, and they didn't go to church anywhere. And during the visit, she was telling me this later, during the visitation, her husband looked at her and said, "What is that I feel? There's something in here." And she said, "Well, I've been trying to tell you, that's the Holy Spirit." Anyway, there was a major change made in them that very night, and they're still in church today because of it. Yes. Just, you know, just the presence.
What year did Ed pass?
64. No,
No.
2004.
Yeah, 2004.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was on that worship team.
Were you here that night?
I
See,
was
I couldn't
here.
remember.
I remember.
But
being up there.
that feeling that was here that night.
Yes.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I, you know, it was good. But the worship team, I mean, and truly, you know, I say you can't. I know God can do anything he wants to, but that's what brings it. We are so blessed with our worship team and with a lot of things here, but that's one of the major things.
I think you nailed it on the head when you said, when I asked you what makes this place different, it's the presence.
It is. Definitely it is. I mean, you know.
I've experienced it since I've started coming here, but hearing stories, I mean, it was that way over here.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Big time before
over
this
there.
was ever thought about.
Yeah. Big time.
Wow.
And and here again, it's not necessarily anything I want on the tape, but
Okay.
my brother-in-law Jim Jackson was deacon over at Oak Grove Church for 40 years. And my sister Helen was, of course, with him. They raised their kids there. They were very, very dedicated, and, and should be. Well, there was a period of time, and it was when we was doing the tent revivals, they started coming here some. And then they started coming basically all the time. And, of course, they were all taught, the tongues is not for now. And they were taught, Helen was told that, they just work you up. You get that music going and you just get all worked up. And that's what happens. Well, first of all, little Miss Helen turned on some worship music at home by herself while she was washing the dishes. And the next thing she knew, she's laying in the floor speaking in tongues. There was nobody there to work her up. That was so good.
Felisa brought that up in their interview. She said, you asked Wanda
Yeah.
about that.
Well, then the second thing, we had a very good service at church that night. And it was all over, pretty well, everything was done. And Brother Bennett had turned his back and was walking back up on the pulpit. And Jim Jackson got out of his seat and was walking toward him and put his hand out. He was going to touch him to tell him he wanted to be prayed for. He put his hand like that. He never touched Brother Bennett. He hit the floor and started speaking in tongues. Now, if that isn't something else, I mean, I know these people. I know what they thought and believed. If that wasn't God, there ain't no God. And
did the same thing happen to Shirley Toon as far as
The next day,
Okay.
after we were in revival, and that's when that Jackson was here.
Stonewall Jackson.
Stonewall. They always call him Stonewall Jackson. He's a renowned old Pentecostal
He did
preacher.
the tent revival.
And he did the tent revivals. And there was just so many different things that took place, even out there under that tent.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had another incident with a lady there who went down in front and they was praying for her. And her husband never would come with her.
He was all against it.
He was totally against it. And they were all down around the altar praying. And she went up to be prayed for. And he got out of his car and come and jerked her up.
Took her out.
Took her out of made her leave. And I've always thought, my. You know, what? That just brought a fear of who knows what could happen to them, to both of them, you know. But there was just so many things that happened. And at the time when Roy and I had decided we were going to come back here that Sunday morning out of the blue, but there was a few people that we could never go see or never stop and talk to them. And of course, I was selling advertising, so I knew every business in town and what was going on in their life. Well, Jim Parks would come out to the car, and Roy would be sitting in the car, and I'd be inside talking to Wanda. Well, all we ended up seeing was, well, you better come go to church with us. Don't you think you better come go to church with us?
That's right.
And Roy said, well, we've been thinking. Said, we know we need to be in church somewhere. You know. So this went on for months. I don't know how long time. But anyway, I had got to know Brother Bennett from working with Wanda and Ed and Parks Lumber Company and all the programming and all that kind of stuff. And of course, Wanda and I knew each other from the time we started school, in high school, actually, because she went down school and I went country. But anyway, that one Sunday morning, it was just like, okay, this is where we're supposed to be. And I still feel that so strong today.
Yeah.
You know, because you have lots of ups and downs, and you get upset about something, and you think, oh well, whatever, you know. But God was in everything that took place. And had it not been for Jim, Ed, and Wanda, and Charlotte, we would have probably never come here again.
When did Roy Lee pass? What year?
2001.
2001.
Yeah, it's been 19 years. Yeah. But
I still think of him sitting over here.
Yeah.
I still see him.
But he had an overwhelming what's the word I want to use? When whoever he met, he had to talk about the Lord and tell them they need to be in church.
Right.
Yeah.
Always.
Wow.
And there was one incident that happened. We were just driving around in town, and we seen a fellow that we knew, and he too was paraplegic. And so he just pulled up next to us, and him and Roy always had a good camaraderie. You know, they weren't really friends, but they had so much connection there. But anyway, Roy started talking to him about coming to church. And I ain't too much about the church stuff. And Roy was so excited and telling him everything that was going on. Boy, you're missing it. You just need to be there. And finally, he looked at him and he says, Roy, he said, if I find out that somebody gave you $1 million to make you this happy, he said, I've never seen you act this way. And Roy said, well, I can tell you something else you need to do, since we're talking about it. He said, how long have you and your girlfriend lived together out of marriage? He said, I know it's been years. And said, she loves you enough to put up with you, and you ain't man enough to give her your name? He said, you better get your life together, son.
Wow.
And I mean, he was dead serious, and I was just telling him.
Yeah.
Do you know after that, they got married?
Yeah.
Is that right?
They're still married.
And are still
Oh,
married.
my goodness.
And we would meet them. They went out to Jim Broyles' church. So they would be coming from town to go there. We were coming from our house, coming to town here. So we met. We passed each other every Sunday morning
Wow.
for years. Years.
Just one conversation changed his life.
Just one.
So you were, go ahead.
Well, there's one other incident I think should be told.
Okay.
You know, everything was very good. The Spirit's great. You experienced all this. You knew what was what. But you know, the devil loves to get in the middle of things, especially when they're going good.
Oh, yeah.
Big time. So there was a period of time that we left the church. We thought we knew it all. Thought we were right. Thought that wasn't being handled the way we thought it should. So we left. Well, we went somewhere else. We stayed in church. Went somewhere else for, I want to say, a couple, 3 years. And every morning, or every Sunday morning I get up, I think, it's just not the same. It's just not here. I'd go to church. You know, we had our grandkids in. We was taking them with us. But I was not home. It was not right. And I love my husband dearly, but he was stubborn as a bull. He gets something on his mind, and he didn't change it. So finally, after about a year and a half, 2 years, I got up one Sunday morning. I said, I'm your wife, and I know I should do, what I should do, and so on and so forth. But I said, I can't do it no more. I said, I'm going back to assembly whether you do or not, because he'd made a statement he'd never walk in here again. So I said, I'm going. So almost a year, I'd come by myself go over and sit with Jim and Charlotte. And once in a while, the grandkids would come with me, and once in a while, they'd go with him. And I'd think, that is so wrong for these kids. This is not good. So about time I thought, okay, I this isn't right. I'm his wife. I should blah, blah, blah. I'll change my mind. And I thought, well, not just yet, but I'm going to. So I'd go ahead and come on to church. Well, one Sunday morning out of the clear blue, got up. Ed says, boys, we're going to church with Grandma today. Yes. Yes. And he came and was here ever since. And the funny thing is, forgiveness is an amazing thing.
Yes.
He had a grudge, and it went on for years. And there was pros and cons, whether it was good or bad, and it was definitely not good. But to say I'm sorry was a big deal. So instead of saying I'm sorry, you do something kind for this other person. It was so funny. It was so funny. So, a flagpole was my peace offering. Well, then just a little bit of time passed, and the peace offering, no apologies, either way. But the peace offering from the other side was a pretty little birdhouse. I thought, God, you are so funny. You know how to handle these guys. And from then on, the forgiveness was there on both sides.
Is that
But
right?
that went on for years. Years. It was crazy.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, and the one that just really tops it off, and I can't say this, but
You say it?
the sons were in business. Never had a crossword. To this day,
Oh
it was
my
sin on those
goodness.
two. Don't you
I
dare.
won't.
But I think it's so funny.
That
And
is
it's
funny.
so good.
That
But
is
it was
funny.
just silliness.
Yeah.
Something Shannon said, and I just thought of it. But anyway, the boys had a job of doing the sidewalks in town.
Oh, yeah.
And pouring concrete for all the new sidewalks and everything. Well, they had Todd
Mhm.
and Chip
Mhm.
to do it, That's who they hired to do it. Well, they had a bunch of concrete and stuff, and it was supposed to come a storm, it was supposed to rain.
Had to get it done.
They had to get it done. They just had to get it all done, so if it rained, it had time to settle. Well, I was driving through town and went down across the old railroad tracks and coming down there beside the First Baptist Church, and I looked over there and I thought, well, that ain't Todd and Chip.
It wasn't. Really?
It was Junior.
Oh my
It
goodness.
did.
It did.
And I thought, thank you, Lord. You
Yeah.
have funny ways of doing things, but it works.
It did. It did work. It did
Yeah.
work.
It did.
So you were going to tell me about Shirley Toon getting the
Oh, yeah.
holy baptism.
Well, that's what I say. His brother Jackson was here, and he had a really strong healing ministry, as well as baptism in the Spirit. And I don't know how many people had went up to be prayed for and to receive the Holy Ghost. And Shirley tried, stayed there, and they prayed, and finally she just got up and went back and sat down. So when we left church, Roy said something to her. He said, well, how come you didn't get up and leave? She said, well, it just wasn't nothing happening. She said, I figured any use for me to stay up there any longer. So she went home. She got out of bed the next morning, getting all the kids off to school and this and that and something else. And she got up out of bed and she started walking down the hallway. She started speaking in tongues, and she couldn't quit. She couldn't quit. Every time she'd go say something, it would be something that's in the Spirit.
Oh my goodness. I've got goosebumps again. You girls.
I gotta tell you another one. This is really
This
kind
could
of
go
funny
on for
too.
days.
Yeah, no, we never get done, But we were. Roy always had such an overwhelming desire to receive the Holy Spirit. I mean, he'd just pray and pray and pray, and he'd study and he'd do everything he could think of, And so we were talking one day, and we was driving around in town, and he said, I just really really want to get that. I feel I need the Holy Spirit. And I said, well, I'm sure you do. And I said, I feel like I do too, but I said, I don't have the same kind of feeling you have about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just overwhelming to him
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for him to receive the baptism. And to me, I said, oh, it'll come to me one of these days. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
But I said, I'm not like you are so hungry to have it right now, I said, I just don't feel that way. Well, we were having Saturday night Bible studies.
Oh, yeah.
And we were in the old kitchen area before on the old gathering place back there, and in the kitchen, and we had, oh gosh, there was lots of people that would come to that Saturday night Bible study, and they were studying about receiving the Holy Spirit. And so we all had big tables spread out, and we'd have little snacks and coffee and whatever, along with it. And so I was sitting there at one table, and Roy was sitting, at a different table. I think he was back behind me somewhere. I don't remember now, but we were both there anyway. And so when we was talking about that day, Roy said, he said, we've got a bunch of tapes that he'd ordered from Jimmy Swaggart and had a book about the baptism in the Holy Spirit. And he said, why don't you just go ahead and read some of that and see, see what you think.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay. So I listened to the tapes and I read most of the book and all, and never said anything to him at all about it. But he said, well, we're going to have to get ready to go to church. And I said, yeah, I'm ready. Let's go. And so we come in, and like I said, we was just in the fellowship hall back there. And Brother Bennett came by and was praying for me. And he just, I think he laid his hand on my head. Best I remember. If he didn't, somebody did.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, when that happened, it just felt like somebody had poured warm oil
Mm-hmm.
from the top of my head all the way to my feet.
And
And the next thing I said was all in tongues.
that overwhelming love.
Wow.
I ain't kidding you. Well, that night, Harold Thompson received the baptism.
There's a bunch of us.
Don Cumley
Mhm.
received the baptism. There was 13 of us all together that one night. But after we had our Bible study, we all went in the sanctuary to just pray, And Don Cumley was one, he said, well, I'm not worried about getting it. He said, one thing for sure, I'm sure not going to get up there and roll under a pew. So guess where he ended up? Speaking in tongues.
That's one thing I wanted to really talk about.
Okay.
Is those Bible studies we had, there was, I don't know how many of us, but we were all young married couples, and most of us had kids. But the kids weren't there, it was just the couples, and it was very informal. We had the round table set up, we drink coffee, we had snacks. Brother Bennett did the teaching. I mean, he was a good teacher. But we could ask questions at any time. It was very informal. And because of that, there was a lot of people that came, and they wanted to know, and they wanted to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't just you sit there and somebody preach at you or talk to you. It was you were involved in it. And I will tell you, from those Saturday night Bible studies with those young couples, almost every one of those couples are still in church today and their families.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a powerful, powerful time. And I had someone tell me just here recently, is like, okay, so you come in and you know, and especially since we're, of course we want everybody, but we're thinking more of people that are unsaved and not have the knowledge that we all have being brought up in church. I mean, you get some of these people have never been in church, and they come in here and they don't know what you're talking about. When we're saying, "Oh, you remember so and so?" Well, no, I don't remember. I don't know what you're talking about. And I've had several people that have said, "Okay, well, once you come in and you get saved, then you're just lost. Then what do you do with them?" 30 minutes on Sunday morning doesn't get it. They need teaching. They need training. They need to be able to be at ease and ask questions. And if it's dumb questions, that's quite all right. And the other thing that I see that I think needs something done, and it's just I'm on the outside looking in, and I'm just thrilled to see all these young people in our church. I mean, that is your church. But they need to be trained. They need to be trained before they're put in positions.
Yes.
Big time.
Yeah.
Because I'm glad they're in positions because that keeps them there. But they have got to have the training. When I see people come in and they do their little job and then they run off, they're not getting any education. And okay, I'll use Michael as an example. Michael says, well, I had never been in church in my life. I had no idea about none of it. And he says, then I come in and he says, I listen to the preacher on Sundays and I read what I can, but a lot of it just don't make any sense to me. And he said, I wasn't kidding when I said I need to be back there with the young kids. I need to be learning those Bible stories. He said, but that's where it needs to be some sort of teaching for these younger Christians. And in all kinds, all age groups, not split them out by ages. That don't mean a thing.
Discipleship needs to happen whatever age you're at.
That's right.
Because if you're a new Christian, you're a new Christian.
At different ages.
If you're 80 or you're 20.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It needs to be. And I think what I keep going back to is that relaxed atmosphere of our Bible studies we were having at the time is why they felt more comfortable coming. I mean, you get a bunch of young couples coming on a Saturday night and couldn't wait to get here.
Yeah.
That's very unusual.
Yeah.
And they'd make arrangements for those kids to be taken care of somewhere. And it made a major impact on a lot of young lives that I see that it's still going.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
Something else I gotta tell you. Sorry to interrupt
no,
you.
you're fine.
So anyway, then, like I say, that night I received the baptism and Roy didn't.
Oh.
Next morning, Shirley was talking in tongues. Well, Roy was so quiet when we left to go home. And
He's the
I
one
said,
who wanted it.
I said, what's the matter? Nothing. He wasn't going to say anything. So I said, okay. So he finally confessed. He said, I was so mad. He said, I couldn't have said a word. He said, I would have totally lost it. He said, you just told me that day you didn't care. You knew you'd get it someday. Well, that was today. Didn't happen to me. Happened to you. I said, well, I don't know what to say. It just happened, And he, just a few, I guess it was over a month, I know. Maybe longer than that. Well, he would still be praying to receive the baptism and never could receive the baptism. So church was almost over and they was having altar service. And Roy still stayed at his, back where we always sat, And I thought, wait a minute. Sister Bennett was sitting in front of us. That for some reason, Sunday night service. And I seen her kind of look around like that, where she didn't want to just turn around and look. Roy was sitting there speaking in tongues.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. Nobody
then-
touched him?
No,
Nobody?
nothing.
Wow.
No, just came.
That's awesome.
People are always saying about receiving the baptism of the Holy Spirit. In my book, you have to reach a place in yourself that nothing but gratitude fills your mind and your heart.
Yeah.
Nothing else is there. Nothing but gratitude for what God has done for us. And that nothing else matters but Him.
That's right.
And we have to go through some things sometimes to reach that point in our life. But when that comes and nothing else matters to you, it doesn't make a bit of difference.
Oh, I agree.
Then he
I
will
agree.
come.
I agree. So, when Pastor Terry, the next R says we should rekindle the flame, what does that look like to you? What does that mean to you?
That spirit being here like it always is. Like we've been doing the past few weeks. We've been rekindling the spirit.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's exactly what that's all about. And it's just happened in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And that's just the beginning of what's coming.
Yes.
Yes.
So when the next one is, and I'll come back to you, but recapturing the vision. So what do you think the vision is for Grace Community Church? You talked about Roy Lee's mom having that dream.
Mm-hmm.
We've had so many dreams and so many prophetic words through the years that this place is going to be more than just
Right.
a small town church.
That is
there's-
the vision.
Yeah, what do you think?
That is the vision. That we are here and that people are drawn here. It's not up to us to work it up or do anything. It's up to us to worship God, and His Spirit will come when we worship God, and when His Spirit comes, those people will come.
So what do you think revival will look like?
Well, we've seen a lot of things in revivals we've been in, in the past. But I still think it will be that and more and more. Because, we think, in fact, there was some people that received the baptism that just act like, well, I got it now, so I'm good. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's all they needed. And yet, they didn't come back for it to be,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to grow and
Yeah.
and to really know and understand just what they did receive,
Mm-hmm.
But for all those years, when we were in the other side over there in the little gathering place, it was the same way. And it was like that first Sunday morning that we had church in the new sanctuary. We all met in the old sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
And walked over.
And we walked, come out the doors together, walked here, and come in the new sanctuary.
Wow.
As a church.
Yeah.
Not just the preacher and everybody else coming when they wanted to.
As a body.
It was the whole body,
Wow.
that came. And there's been so many times that you question, and you're not supposed to question God. But all those years that Roy had been so sick, and every time he'd get real bad, he'd end up in the hospital or something, else was going on. And when we was working on getting the setup going for the Christmas tree with Wanda and Ed and Jim and Charlotte, well, it was like Roy was having a real severe headaches, and we didn't know why. He had never had that bad like that before. And so that same Sunday when we just decided to pull in here and go to church, well, they were getting ready to have a kids revival or, for the little guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, Peach, he said, go ask Wanda or call Wanda and ask her if it's just for the little kids or if we're all supposed to, come. So I called her, and we'd been out in the front yard, and I was washing the car, and he was just sitting there, and he didn't feel good. He still had these bad headaches. And so finally he said, well, I'm going to lay down for a little while, maybe it'll be better.
Mm-hmm.
And so Wanda said, no, anybody can come, you can just come in time, you'd be geared to the kids. Well, we didn't get to come back that night.
Mm-hmm.
And we were intending to come.
Mm-hmm.
And Roy just kept getting sicker and sicker. And I mean, he was actually beating the walls. He was in so much pain. So I called the ambulance, called the hospital. And they said, well, we can't do anything unless, I said, he needs to go to Columbia. Well, we can't just take him. Somebody's going to have to call and say that that's where he needs to go. Well, we went out to the ER. They looked at him, gave him some pain medication, gave him a shot, and said by morning, he said it'll probably be wearing off, but he said, you know, it should help. Okay, so we did. We went home. Well, the medication kept him from being awake. They'd given him so much. But when that wore off, it was the same thing, only worse.
Oh my.
So then we got back out to the hospital again, and I said he needs to go to Columbia. And he said, Roy said, well, if I don't go to Columbia, just take me to Rolla, you know. And they said, we can't just take you to Rolla because you said take me to Rolla.
Right.
When you know he couldn't even begin to drive or get in and out of the car. And so anyway, I thought, he's going to go to Rolla if I have to get in the ambulance and drive it myself. And that's really what I thought. Because I thought, you know, he's going to die. Something is bad wrong. So anyway, finally, Dr. Burnett was still here. And that's who Roy had went to all the time. So he called him, or I called him. And he said, it's okay, take him to Rolla. So I did. Went to Rolla. Well, this is a 2 or 3 day affair.
Yeah.
Trying to get him to Columbia.
Yeah.
And so finally, we brought him back home from Rolla, and it's the same story. They didn't see anything wrong, just migraines. Take him home, he'll be better. Well, he didn't get better, he kept getting worse. And so I called Dr. Burnett again, and I said, you call them and tell him he's got to go to Columbia. Because I said, he's going to lay right here and die. And he's too sick to think about going anywhere else. I said, we've been to both hospitals here. And I said, they all just did the same thing, give him a shot for pain and send him home. So he called the hospital and he told them, he said, just take him on to Columbia. And so he said, you just take him back out there or tell him come and get him. And then I said it was okay and I'll call him. I said, well, you'll have to call him. So anyway, we get out to the hospital and Joe Adamek was out there that night working. And so anyway, you know, they always make you get out at Salem to evaluate you before they send you somewhere else. Well, Joe opened the door on the ambulance and was standing there talking to us, and he said, we're not going to make him come in. I've got his medication. I'll give him a shot so he can make it to Columbia. And I said, well, I'm riding with him. I said, I don't care what anybody says. I'm going in that ambulance with him. And Joe said, that's okay. But he said, now you got to remember. He said, we're just taking him there and dropping him off. We cannot wait for them to bring him back home.
Right.
And I looked at Joe and I said, Joe, I said, if the Lord don't do something, I said, he won't come back in an ambulance or anything else. He'll be with the Lord. So it was 79, I guess. Anyway, we had this real bad drought, and even big trees were dying. No rain. Hadn't had no rain for months. So I'm sitting in the ambulance looking out the window. Roy was laying in front of me. And I just kept watching the sky. And I'd see the rainbow. And I found that rainbow followed us. It never went away.
Wow.
Hadn't been a drop of rain anywhere for months and months and months. Why we got a rainbow? And I thought I'd lost my mind. I really did. I thought I was just hallucinating. And so Mary, well, she was Mary Wisdom then. She was a nurse running, and she worked on the ambulance, and she was in the back with me and Roy.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got ready to turn off of 63 to turn up, go Stadium Drive to the hospital, I said, Mary, what do you see over there looking out the window? And I said, do you see anything different? And she said, well, my goodness, there's a rainbow out there. Where'd that rainbow come from? I said, it's followed us ever since we left home.
Wow. Huh.
So we go in the hospital.
Signs and wonders.
Before I ever got him signed in, the doctors was coming back to me saying he's got spinal meningitis.
Mm.
And that's what's right. He's having so much pain, his brain's swelling. And said, we need to do a spinal tap to know for sure what's going on.
Yeah.
So I signed it. I said, yeah, do whatever you have to do, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So sure enough, that's what it was.
Wow.
Well, this was all over, like I say, just a few days. And when we finally got to the hospital, and the next morning, early the next morning, the first person we seen was Brother Bennett.
That's before they were in church.
And we weren't in church. We've been there one time.
Is that right?
One time for that Sunday morning service.
Oh my goodness.
And there was just so many things that happened
Mm-hmm.
after that. Well, Roy was out of it for 4 or 5 days. He never did wake up,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And he had a new doctor, and he was a young doctor just doing his hospital stay, you know, part of their training or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he would come in our room, and when Roy got conscious enough to speak and talk, he was always telling this little doctor about the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
No. Always.
My goodness.
And he began to get better. So when we come home, I thought, well, Lord, if he don't make it, or if he does, I'm going to serve you.
Yeah.
I'm going to serve you. And
You drew
Well,
that line in the sand.
And so whenever Roy got home, he'd go out and sit outside under a tree or get off to himself and just pray.
Mm-hmm.
And finally he said one day, he said, well, he said, I know. He said, I've made up my mind. I've got to do this. And he said, I feel like we ought to go back to that church
Mm-hmm.
and get sincere about serving the Lord. Because he said, I always try to deal with the Lord and say, if you do this for me, I'll serve you. I'll do something, you know, blah, blah, blah. So he said, this time, he said, it was different. And I said, yeah, it was different for me too. And he said, well, he said, all that time I spent out there dwelling and thinking about it and praying and stuff. And he said, I finally told the Lord, I've told you over and over I'd serve you if you would do this or that or something else. And he said, I'm not going to tell you that again. He said, I'm going to show you I will live for you no matter what you do.
Or don't do.
No matter what you do or you don't do.
Yeah.
And that's where we came.
Wow. That's a testimony. What, I don't know, I think you feel the same way I feel. I feel like everything, we took a detour for several years after Tammy.
Oh,
Yes. Big time.
And it got us off on a detour path, but I feel like our path is getting ready to merge back with our destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I feel like everything's lined up. And is the devil fighting tooth and nail?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. And he
And
will.
what a time to try to be pastoring
Oh, yeah.
a move of God with all this stuff going on. But I just feel like things are lining up in the heavenlies. The Spirit, it's gonna happen. All these things that we've been promised all these years, that this place is going to be, is gonna come to pass.
Yeah.
We just keep clinging to that.
And you know, something I think about is, and we definitely do want numbers. We want more, as many people saved as we as possibly can be. We want numbers. But at the same time, I think what we're feeling is we want the sincerity and the depth to be there as well, even if the numbers are not. You know, we all have so much to learn, and I want to be the first to say, as much as we know, we still will go away sometimes, go off on the wrong track. And as long as that desire is still there and can bring us back, we learn from those mistakes, and usually it'll make us stronger. But at the same time, I think people ought to know, if you've gotten off on this wrong track, don't quit coming. You know, a lot of people get discouraged because they think, well, you know, I'm not doing what I should, and I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm not. And then so they stay away because it condemns them when they come. But that's the whole reason for coming, because you hear that word, and that word will take care of it eventually. Now, it may be a day, it may be a month, it may be a year. But if you don't come, then your heart just hardens, and then you lose hope. And that's what I think a lot of people come, and then they say, oh, well, you know, yeah, I came and I was doing good, and then all this and this happened, and so I'm just not, I can't live it, so I'm not going to do it. Well, that's the whole wrong attitude. That's when you need it the most. And you know, if you think this church